Greetings from LA, my dear friends. This is Daisuke, and I very much hope that this video finds you well and in very good spirits wherever you are in the world. And today, if you don't mind, I would very much like to continue on with our journeys, our discussions, our discoveries, and our explorations with respect to the recent releases made by the Criterion Collection during this year of 2024. And specifically, I'd like to focus our attention, if I may, on a wonderful set, a multi-disc Blu-ray set, which we have been talking about over the course of a number of videos. And this is from the filmmaker, the great filmmaker, Eric Rohmer. And this set is designated collectively at spine number 1206 by the Criterion Collection. It is this set, Eric Rohmer's Tales of the Four Seasons, Contes des Quatre Saisons. And so we have been discussing, you and I, my dear friends, the films that are the great films that are contained within this collection of films, the cycle of works from the one, the only artist extraordinaire, Eric Rohmer. So today, if you don't mind, I would very much like to draw our attention and focus our attention, my dear friends, on the wonderful work which is described as being from the year 1996. Again, part of the cycle of works. And the filmmaker is Eric Rohmer. And the name of the work is, and please pardon me once again for my very poor pronunciation of the French language. I hope you can forgive me. I will do my very best. But the name of the work is Contes d'été, or A Tale of Summer. So this is the work, another brilliant, beautiful, magnificent, and charming film in all respects, in all accounts, from the master filmmaker extraordinaire, Eric Rohmer. And this is continuing the cycle of works known as Tales of the Four Seasons, this focusing in on the season of summer by virtue of the title, but also, of course, in terms of the content and the locale and setting that greet us when we as viewers enter into this world and watch this really remarkable work of art. And this is described as being from the year 1996, written and directed by Eric Rohmer, and production manager Françoise Etchegaray, and Diane Baratier is the cinematographer, Mary Stephen editor, and etc. And sound recordist Pascal Ribier. And in terms of its great cast, really great cast. And please, once again, I'm so sorry for my bad pronunciation, but I hope you can forgive me. We have people like Melville Poupeau and Amanda Langlais and Gwenaëlle Simon, Aurélia Nolin, and others. And they portray another core of key characters, the key quartet, as it were, in terms of the various relationships and relationship changes and talks and discussions and walks in nature, traveling on boat to seaside, in this case the coastline, or the coastal seaside area, Brittany, in this lovely mixture, lovely concoction of scenes and feelings, of romance in the air, of possibilities, of unknown factors, of choices that need to be made, and whether or not those choices can indeed be made in one direction or another, or whether indecision will rule all, among other things that will delight us and confront us and greet us when we watch this work. This is the work which is Contes d'été, or Tale of Summer. So, yes, I mentioned the fact that this is set in the sort of seaside area, Brittany. According to the materials, the resort is called Seaside Resort of Dinard, and we are essentially thrust into this world immediately in terms of traveling there, as well as and accompanying our main character, one of our main characters, and this is Gaspard, the young man whom we will follow as viewers. And we understand that there is a kind of musician background aspect to him, which will also carry forth in a lot of things, both in terms of revelations about his background and character arc and development, but also perhaps in some interesting ways how his music will play key roles in being able to, or not, as the case might be, connect with other people that he meets in this area, as well as seeing how his music and musical background may or may not have some direct implications into the types of choices that he, like the Gaspard character, might throughout the film be asked to or be forced to make, and sometimes be forced to make due to reasons that are totally within his control or totally within his control, but for whatever reason he is forced or compelled to make them. So this is my very grandiose way to try to avoid the details of the plot here. But suffice to say, Gaspard, this young man whom we meet practically immediately from the start of this work, is going to be playing a central role in this. And one of the ways, of course, that he's going to be playing a central role is not just by virtue of the fact that we spend a lot of time with him as viewers in, I think, wonderful way, set against the backdrop of this wonderful setting, the idea of art and music combined with the romantic aspect, the landscape, the feeling of the outdoors. You can feel the seaside air, maybe the light fragrance of salt and sand, and the waves in the distance, and the people there. Not just Gaspard, but it's a seaside community town. It's also like a resort community area. So there are a lot of people there enjoying the summer season, and Gaspard is one of them. But of course, as in the world of Eric Rohmer, here's where we will get the wonderful permutations and wonderful connections and dynamic combinations of him and other characters that we will meet. And specifically, we will meet, for instance, Margot, the Amanda Longley character, and who has her own background, and through a certain set of maybe chance circumstance that later unfolds when chance meetings seem to repeat themselves, they form a kind of connection and friendship that may or may not have hints of the possibility of romance or intimacy between them. Again, as we progress through a good portion of this film, we see their meeting, they're making a kind of connection, the kindling of a relationship, the kindling of that flame, and how it's also a part of the ambiance of the decor and setting and the environment of this community, and also how they are getting to know each other. And one of the lovely things about their relationship is the process of them getting to know each other via walks and strolls together, and then they are talking. They are given the opportunity to talk and give us dialogue about themselves with a sort of forward lateral motion, physically traveling from place to place, walking from place to place, sometimes in a car, etc. But then also revealing much about themselves, and also how their own perspectives might have some insight into how they view the other. And so these are the great dialogue scenes that I think are one of the reasons why Eric Rohmer films are very famous and very beloved. And we see, I think, in many ways, what could be said to be some of the great wonderful, prime, pristine, beautiful examples of the walk and talking dialogue scenes that are so mellifluous and a joy to hear, and even to my own untrained ear, where I am admittedly not at all to the level of, say, a native speaker of the language. That being said, there is a lovely kind of rapport and elegance and connection that is made between Eric Rohmer characters when they are allowed to speak and shine as they are, who they are. And I think the conversations between Margot and Gaspard that are shown in a good bulk of this film, I think, are great examples and testaments of the great power of Rohmer cinema. I mean, these are one of the loveliest passages in the film, and it really also is supported so well by the effervescence of the performances. There is a youthfulness and vigor that is showing through very much. There's also a kind of hint of of maybe disregard and maybe confusion and unknown about the future that is shown through, and in particular, perhaps in the case of Gaspard, the young man, and his character, and what we realize what it is he is trying to do, and specifically who he knows and the relationships that he is describing himself already in at the time he arrives here and begins his friendship with Margot, or his companionship with Margot, and how those feelings might be turning into something or not, depending on, among other things, what the current relationship's status is for each of the characters respectively, because we know a little bit about Margot based on what she tells us about her background, her life, why she is here, and who she knows and who she is with at the given moment in time, who may or may not be part of the actual characters that we see on screen. And also we get to know a little bit about Gaspard and the young man and his situation with the character Lena, who is off screen, but who may make an appearance a little bit later. And so someone that he has a great deal of affection for, but there is a kind of confusion. There's a little bit of a maybe not being quite sure what's going on. And so that also is the possibility of learning and finding out about another woman in Gaspard's life, and this will form another component in this film, but yet another component that is also going to be introduced in terms of characters that Gaspard will meet is the character of Solène, and through a set of circumstances that involve maybe people who know people who know people who know people, and also the continuing ongoing, say, relationship, friendship that might be something else, who knows, between Margot and Gaspard. There is also the way in which Gaspard meets and connects with another woman who is Solène. And so, and we have an interesting dialogue and exchange and occurrences that occur vis-a-vis the character of Gaspard and then Solène. They're getting to know each other. They're getting to really connect with each other, almost in a kind of intense romantic way, possibly so anyway. And how music has an interesting connective possibility between the two of them. A certain song about the ships and the sea, I think, becomes very prevalent, and how that also is somehow or another linked to a type of say, mythology of the landscape, shall we say, that I think in turn enhances the romantic airs that are definitely a part of their relationship, at least during the initial stages of it. And then, as I mentioned, as Gaspard has mentioned to us, he has, of course, a previous relationship, a current relationship of a woman. This is Lena, who also arrives in the seaside resort at a certain interesting timing. And so, therefore, we have Gaspard and his interactions. And we do see some interactions between him and Lena, which has a certain degree of magic and romance on the one hand, but there is actually too a lot of doubt and maybe self-doubt and maybe a bit of incongruence and some maybe lack of connection. And perhaps that lack of connection is also made apparent in the other relationships that we have seen to progress and develop and bloom and blossom throughout this film, that being the relationship between Gaspard and not just Lena, his girlfriend, but also Gaspard and Solène, and also Gaspard and Margot. And so, therefore, it becomes, in an interesting way, too, from the perspective of Gaspard, a consideration or situation about choice and choosing. And three women, and we have, from Gaspard's point of view, three women who, I think, for him, when he is together with them in their own ways, in their relationships in their own ways, they bring about a certain, say, unique sensibility about them. You know, each relationship is unique, and each relationship is its own living thing. And so I think it's really fascinating to see the dynamics of the ambiance of the film and how it feels when, for instance, we see Gaspard together with Margot, and then how the dynamic feels a little bit same but different when we see the scenes between Gaspard and Solène, and yet how the dynamic is even more changed, and yet there's some similarities when we see the scenes between Lena and Gaspard. So each of these three relationships has its own dynamics and rhythms and cadences and feelings and heartbeats that have some certain similarities, but they're also quite different. And so this, in cinematic form, I think is expressing the choice that Gaspard is confronted with and will have to face, and through also a certain development of plot machinations, he will have to choose between maybe a romance with one woman, or a romance with another woman, or a romance with another woman, or potentially so anyway. And what kind of choice will Gaspard make? Who will his heart bring him to, and what does his heart say to him? And are these choices that he is maybe confronted with, because there are some instances too, maybe some time of maybe comic hijinks on the one hand, but also type of dramatic intensity on the other. There are some instances in the film where his choices are oftentimes seen as maybe things of his own doing on the one hand. Maybe there's a certain degree of indecision that makes him not maybe endeavor to try to be more decisive for the sake of everyone concerned, but maybe not quite being able to do so, or not quite being willing to do so, or maybe not quite knowing that he needs to do so. And whatever the case may be, maybe that state of indecision might lead to some quite awkward and difficult, say, encounters to begin with, like the scheduling of a date, for instance, or a day out or day trip, due to certain levels of indecision. It might be such that he might have scheduled something with two different people on the same day, for instance. And so what is he going to do? So that itself brings, I think, a dramatic immediacy to what one might call the larger life issue, or the life question that could potentially affect Gaspard based on whoever it is he chooses. And I should point out too that it is not just a one-way decision here, because we are also given so much room to see the character of Solène and her needs and her wants and what it is she's looking for vis-a-vis relationships with people like Gaspard. And also the same is true for Lena. What it is that she seems to want and she seems to be attracted to, or maybe turned off by in the context of her relationship with Gaspard. So there are those aspects as well. And in particular to Margot's character, this is the Amanda Langlais character, who really shows us so much of herself, tells us so much of herself. And there's also the sense of possibility yet impossibility that could be based on how she perceives Gaspard, but also how she perceives and looks at herself. Maybe the timing could be right, or maybe it isn't right, etc. And so it's a wonderful kind of, I think, balance between Gaspard's perspective and also us being able to look at Gaspard through the perspective of others. And others may or may not see, and the others meaning the three women, and each of them respectively may or may not consider Gaspard. They might be considering something else entirely. And so this is indeed all possible within the realm of Eric Rohmer. And what will happen? What is going to happen? What choices will be made? Who will choose whom in this interesting, entertaining, romantic, a cinematic escapade that is so filled with, I think, vigor and life and charm and romance, and a type of summer whimsy that is so delightful and so welcoming and so warm. What will happen? That question too adds a sense of suspense and also a sense of entertaining engagement. It's a marvelous work. And I think it is supported by a number of things that, for instance, and as I mentioned, the grandness and the greatness of the performances. As I mentioned, the characters each bring their own set of selves to the table, as a manner of speaking. So their reactions are themselves so individual and so unique. I mean, just look at the reactions, how people react, like Aurélia Noland's Lena, how she reacts to certain situations. So there's a very famous scene in between her and Gaspard on a beach as they're walking. So see certain reactions that she has in her performance versus, say, how Margot, the Amanda Langlais character, how her reactions are in similar types of dialogue scenes, similarly situated along coastlines and beaches, etc. And then also, too, the reactions of the character of Solène. This is Gwenaëlle Simon, and how this also is very affecting in terms of her performance. So I love how there is a uniqueness and a wonderful living quality and essence to each of the performances of these key characters as they are responding to Gaspard, and also how as they are reflecting who they are. So I think that's really wonderful. So the performances are standout, and of course Melville Poupeau as Gaspard, the wonderful look that he has. I think there is a sense of earnestness on the one hand, and also there's a little bit of feeling out of place on the other. I love that sense of being confident, but also being not confident at the same time. He seems to fit in certain regards, or maybe wants to, but you can tell also based on his mannerisms, his physicality, maybe he's having trouble fitting in as well. And that could be a reflection, too, an outward reflection of his inwardly situated state of indecision. And I think that is again a testament to the great performance here. The Poupeau performance is really remarkable, and then all under the guiding hand of the great artists, right? Eric Rohmer and company. It's a lovely, charming work, and it's as I mentioned before, each film. It seems like it's my favorite of the Tales of the Four Seasons. And so A Tale of Summer, is now preoccupying my mind and my thoughts here. It could be, right now, if you ask me, it's my favorite of the tales. But if you asked me yesterday when I was speaking about A Tale of Winter, that would have been my favorite. But that's what's so great about a film like A Tale of Summer and then the Tales overall, the Tales of the Four Seasons overall, is that they each bring to the table something unique and different, but there's something also that connects them with each other. As I mentioned before, there's this issue of choice, or the concept of choice and chance meetings, which is something very similar to what we might find in, say, a work like A Tale of Winter, for instance, in terms of a choice, and also the quartet. In Tale of Winter was one woman and two or three men, considering that plot and what happens in that film. And then here, A Tale of Summer, we have one young man and three young women. As part of the dynamic, the character dynamic. So, and then also choice is also very heavily intertwined in this. And so this is, and then not just within the Tales of the Four Seasons, but those who know Eric Rohmer's body of work will recognize also some wonderful connections in terms of people who appear, as well as certain thematic points. Amanda Langlais, for instance, and some other thematic points of Tales of the Four Seasons, and also the decor and ambiance, and visiting seaside resort areas. You might see similar motifs and other characters or other performances from actors who have appeared in past Rohmer films, such as the comedies and Proverbs cycle, which is another very famous cycle of Criterion. By the way, I know it's gotten a great release outside of Criterion, but it would be wonderful if Criterion was able to release comedies and Proverbs. But that's a story for another day. But in any event, that's one way that this is a fun, engaging thing, to see the little details and connections that one could spot if one is a Rohmer fan, or knows Rohmer's works through and through. You can watch a film like Tale of Summer or the other tales and spot all the connections that are there. And also at the same time, you can enjoy this film on its merits. And what a delight this is. What a charming tale this is. What a charming set of stories this is. And it's inviting, as I say, it's captivating. It is you fall into the rhythms of the romance in the way that so commanding and so soft and so beautiful. It is this film, which is Conte d'été, or A Tale of Summer. The Criterion Collection has released this film, Conte d'été, A Tale of Summer, as part of this great multi-disc Blu-ray set, Eric Rohmer's Tales of the Four Seasons. Again, collectively, it's spine number 1206. Yes, 06, that's right, 1206. And here we have the 1996 film, A Tale of Summer, on its own Blu-ray disc. So, in fact, there are 4 discs, A Tale of Summer being on one of the discs. And in terms of the order of chronology or filmography, it is the 3rd film in this cycle of works, Tales of the Four Seasons. And just with regard to the presentation, it is in 1.37 to 1 aspect ratio. And according to the materials of this wonderful stapled, multi-pages, robust staple booklet from Criterion about the masters on page 26, and I quote, the new digital masters presented here were created at the Digimage in Paris from the 35mm original camera negatives for A Tale of Springtime, A Tale of Summer, and A Tale of Autumn, and from the 16mm original camera negative for A Tale of Winter, and restored in 2K resolution. The original monaural soundtracks were mastered from the magnetic tracks. So you know, I have very, very little knowledge base when it comes to the release history of this film, and then also the home media and physical media history of this film. So my knowledge base is incredibly limited about this. But if I were to try to express it in terms of my own subjective take and my engagement with the work on these grounds, I would say that once again, there is and I mean this so profusely complimentarily, 100% complimentarily, there is a kind of modesty in the way in which Rohmer's cinema is being captured. In particular, I mean, I think this is true throughout, at least my take on Rohmer's cinema. It seems to be the case in particular with Tales of the Four Seasons, and also with the knowledge base of how these films were made. There was a kind of a very small number of crew, and it was a very low-key, intimate type of affair in terms of making it. And you actually get a sense of it in one of the making of documentaries, which is part of this set of supplements, which we'll talk about a little bit later. But that, I think, the low-key aspect of it and the modest nature of it, I think, work wonders to really enhance and allow us in and almost give us a feel of being there on the spot, almost unintrusive on the one hand, but also understanding, too, that there is some wonderful artistic consideration in terms of the framing and the type of way in which the whole beauty of the scene is presented through how everything is expressed here. So, and I love too that there's a kind of almost maybe softness to the scenes and to the presentation, which I admire very much. And that softness, I think, makes me feel even more. I can almost get a sense of the seaside air. I get maybe get a scent of it. Or feel it in the air, the breeze and the salt and the sand, as I mentioned earlier. You can almost feel it, which I find very remarkable indeed. I mean, it's not overpowering; it's delicate. It's just enough, and so that I think is so important and so vital because it's like that seaside area place that one goes to, one visits, that feels very at home and very homegrown on the one hand, but it's these little details that also make it very magical, and that air of magical quality almost make it almost otherworldly in this soft, quiet way. I don't know if I'm expressing myself very well, but I think that is captured very well in the visual palette and the audio palette as well. But that also, I think, serves very nicely from a psychological point of view, from my vantage point as a viewer anyway, because it's this interesting world that Gaspard occupies, right, with this. It's a kind of place where he visits and he can live out certain days of his life in the summer, but then maybe his time will end and maybe he will have to leave. So there's a kind of impermanence, which, again, just thinking back to a sense of the seaside and the air, almost a kind of magical quality that I think lends itself very nicely to sort of psychological framing of the impermanence of things in the context of the sort of romantic adventures or misadventures, as the case may be, of Gaspard and company. So that is my very long-winded way of saying that I really enjoyed how this looked and sounds here for the purposes of this Criterion release. And so, if I might be permitted to, let me also continue on with the supplements that are found here. So, as I mentioned, A Tale of Summer is found on one of the Blu-ray discs. It is the third Blu-ray disc, I think. And so, in keeping with the film being the third in the cycle of 4 films. So, we have the film being made available, but we also have supplements. So here's the disc in the player, and we have a really nice montage photos here of parts of the film, etc. And it's really, really lovely. And then if we scroll down to the supplements menu, we have 2 supplements. The first is Eric Rohmer on A Tale of Summer. So when I press this, it says on the menu, and I quote, "In this excerpted audio interview conducted by film critic Michel Simon in 1996, director Eric Rohmer discusses the making of the third installment of Tales of the Four Seasons. This is approximately 13 minutes, and it's an audio interview again, so much like before with the previous films and those audio interview excerpts with Eric Rohmer. There was like a interesting little motif of a revolving tape reels, so each with a different color. Excuse me. So, which is interesting. Here we have another discussion between the two. Eric Rohmer, our film critic Michel Simon, is also talking about vacation movies and how, in fact, in a lot of Rohmer's films, not just Tale of Summer, but also in other films such as Pauline at the Beach or La Collectionneuse, etc. There are Claire's Knee, for instance. There are other films that maybe are going to different places, seaside resorts, seaside areas, almost like a travelogue type of aesthetic, which is really lovely. Vacation movies, I think, is the phrase that's used here. But they are all different settings in a way, so it's almost like maybe Eric Rohmer is trying to catalog all these different lovely locations across the country, which might be the case here. And also, speaking of Pauline at the Beach, there's also a wonderful connection, of course, between the earlier film Pauline at the Beach and Tale of Summer, not just in terms of the the setting and the decor, but also in terms of the actor and the performance. And there's an interesting discussion here too about working with Amanda Langlais and also deciding on who would be cast, how the casting process was determined here, and finding the actors and working with the actors that are appearing here. For instance, sometimes some performances required some actors to be quite musical and have a singing voice, for instance. And so this is also revealed in some of the discussions here about some of the key characters and performances. It's really great. And then also to this idea of the thematic concerns, especially with regard to one of the main characters. This is Gaspard. Hesitation, how this place is a place of hesitation, or the person as well, in terms of hesitation, indecision. A man without qualities is also cited here as well as a kind of reference point, which I think is really interesting as well. And then, too, the notion about focusing on characters, and I think one of the things that's posited here is how I think it's maybe brought up as to perhaps possibly this could be one of the maybe rare instances in the world of Rohmer films where Rohmer has as its main central protagonist a male character. That doesn't quite seem to, according to Michel Simon anyway, that doesn't quite seem to be the case with his other films where we've had female protagonists as the central figure in terms of the contours of the stories. But Eric Rohmer, I think, agrees with that, but also gives a little bit of maybe counter to that hypothesis, in a manner of speaking. And also that leads into an interesting discussion between, say, the similarities and differences between certain points of the Tales of the Four Seasons cycle on the one hand, and also the Six Moral Tales, which is another key earlier cycle in the career of Eric Rohmer, and also citing maybe key similarities and differences having to do, say, with male characters and female characters, and also notions, of choice and fate and faith as well, and certain similarities and differences between the two cycles, using Tale of Summer and also My Night at Maud's as examples, perhaps. So La Collectionneuse as well as another example. But in any event, we have, I think, another wonderful discussion here. It's Tale of Summer specific, so that's really nice. And it's approximately 13 minutes, the audio excerpt. So this is really nice. So that's the first of the supplements. Then we get to this, which is the making of A Tale of Summer. And it says here, and I quote, producer Françoise Etchegaray and filmmaker Jean-André Fieschi assembled this documentary from footage shot by Etchegaray while on location in Brittany for the making of A Tale of Summer in 1995. So, yes, this is a great fly-on-the-wall documentary, behind the scenes, and it's great. It's feature length. It's about an hour and 37 minutes. So sometimes, especially at the beginning, you'll get shots of Eric Rohmer talking directly to the camera, actually doing the clapperboard in many instances we see, which is really cool, by the way. And then seeing some of the shots and some of the locations and some of the shooting. I think a lot of the bulk of this documentary is dealing with the scenes between Gaspard and Margot, and so this is Melville Poupeau and Amanda Langlais. There's a lot of appearances of them, although the other actors do make appearances. Gwenaëlle Simon and Aurélien Nolan, and so seeing the rehearsal process and also the shooting process, and seeing, as I mentioned before, this is a very small crew in terms of number of persons, and it's also very low key. You actually see them integrated into the community and society, and seeing that they're shooting on the beach while there are these passers-by there, and just and so it's just like they're just on the beach and they're shooting a movie, and so it's really lovely like that. It's very methodical, and so there's a lovely type of calmness that you can get a sense of in terms of the shooting atmosphere. But there's also this idea too of trying to get it right and thinking about the details, which I really love. And you can tell too that there is a great rapport and back and forth between say Eric Rohmer and some of the other the producers, etc., but also the actors as well. There's a great connection of discussion and dialogue that's happening. So it's really lovely, really, really great indeed. I enjoyed this immensely. And now I should point out just a couple of things, though, which is, okay, so around the 8-minute mark, there is what I would call a kind of, I don't know, videotape blur or blemish. It goes by really quickly, but there is a type of blemish. Now, I think that is probably something that I don't consider a critique per se. It's something that was probably unavoidable given what I assume to be the state of things for the materials, at least at that particular point of the documentary. But just keep that in mind. There's one thing. It doesn't detract from one's overall enjoyment of the film. But it is noticeable, but it goes by really quickly. So that's one thing. So I count by around the 8-minute mark. So it goes by really quickly. But another thing, too, which I found was that, at least for the disc that I have, which I got from my local Barnes & Noble, the disc is subtitled because people are speaking French. And as I mentioned before, the documentary totaling overall is 1 hour 37 minutes. So I was watching it and I was enjoying it very much, starting and then just watching it until I hit the 1 hour mark. And then all of a sudden, for some reason, I have no idea why specifically, but the English subtitles stopped. And so the film was going, but at around the 1 hour mark, there were no more English subtitles. And I was trying to fiddle around with the buttons and the options, and maybe turn off the machine, turn on the machine again, maybe eject it and put the disc back in or something, but or use a different player. I have a different player in a separate room here, but unfortunately, for me anyway, in this disc, when I hit the hour mark, there are no more English subtitles. So it really prevented me, unfortunately, from getting into what was maybe the final parts of this documentary. So as I say, there would have been about 37 minutes left. There's a lot of talking still, and so I don't know the context. I don't know specifically what they're talking about, because I don't speak the French language at all very well. So unfortunately, I was not able to catch those moments specifically in terms of the meaning of the conversations that the people were having. I was still able to enjoy, say, the ambiance, and I could kind of get a sense of what they were speaking about based on my knowledge of what the scenes were in the film. But just keep that in mind, at least for my disc. Now, I don't know if that's true for anyone else out there. If you have seen this and you have no trouble with the English subtitles, please let me know. Maybe it's a kind of just a one-off on my own disc, in which case, these things happen. If that's the case, then I'll just very, very gladly and very gently reach out to the Criterion Collection support email and maybe ask if they know how this issue can be fixed and so, because I really do. I'm curious as to what they're saying. So. And so, unfortunately, my French level is not at all high enough, so I have to rely on the English subtitles. So I wish there could be a version of this via the Criterion release where all the English subtitles from the first minute to the the hour and 37th minute, and every minute in between, I hope that all the subtitles are intact. But that's my own personal issue with this specific disc and this specific supplement, at least as appears on this physical media item that I've purchased right from my local Barnes and Noble. So I'm not sure if it's a one-off defect of my disc and it doesn't bother everyone else, or maybe it's something a little bit more widespread. But in any event, please let me know, anyone who's played that part, and if you had issues or not, please let me know. But for me, I'll probably have to reach out to Criterion a little bit later. But that's okay. That's not a problem. It's not a problem at all. But we'll see what we can do. But that doesn't take away at all from my joy, my absolute joy in watching this documentary. I want to emphasize that. My joy in watching this documentary is undisturbed. And I think primarily because I can see the people in action. There are some moments when they're really very intimate when the camera's off. The shooting is they're just in between takes or something, and there's some really frank and so the cast and crew are really together. There's some moments when maybe I was kind of surprised when they were talking about just the sunlight and sort of the intensity of the sunlight. It was getting hot, and you see the actors just changing clothes, and then to levels of being partially nude or nude at some points, but in front of everyone, but changing and coming back. So there's a kind of frankness or a level of, say, closeness between people that I thought was really. It was, I think, an example perhaps of something that we had seen in an earlier supplement, in an earlier disc, the supplement that was accompanying the film A Tale of Winter, for collaborators, where it was discussed, I think, by Ichigai and others about how it's a very low-key affair, and people are, it's like everyone can fit in one van or something, and then work in a very close-knit sort of way, and that is a very wonderful and warm and generous way of working. You see Eric Rohmer on set too, or on location, as I mentioned, doing the clapperboard thing with his hands and just thinking about considering how the heat is affecting him. There's also some interesting moments in terms of dancing too, which is really awesome. So Eric Rohmer is so awesome. But in any event, this is so revealing about the process of Eric Rohmer and company, and how people feel, I think, really comfortable in around everyone and in each other's presence, because they know that they're working together to make something good, and something good they have indeed made, because this film is the end result. What a film this is. So yeah, my joy of this, of getting a little insight into the making of this film, my joy is left undisturbed, so in a great way. So this is the state of things with regard to the supplements of A Tale of Summer. And then last but not least, I should point out very briefly the booklet, as I mentioned earlier. This has a comprehensive essay regarding all the films. That comprehensive essay is written by Imogen Sarah Smith, the great Imogen Sarah Smith. We will talk about the comprehensive essay plus other aspects of the packaging, etc. in a separate video. But just note that there are some parts of the comprehensive essay that can be said to be A Tale of Summer specific. So that's one thing to keep in mind. That's good. And also, I mean, other parts of the essay, I mean, it's not the only thing that's good about the essay. It's all across the board fantastic, but that's one reason why the essay is great. And the other thing, too, is we do have some Tale of Summer specific pages on pages 8 and 9. Here is a synopsis write-up on one side with cast and crew details, and also the picture collage, which is also reminiscent of the Blu-ray menu, which is what we have here. So this is, in a nutshell, my feelings about the Criterion release of A Tale of Summer. It is a glorious film. It is a lovely film, absolutely lovely film. They all are in their own ways, as is this. Eric Rohmer's great film, Conte d'été, or A Tale of Summer. All right, my dear friends, so that's it for now. We will still continue on with our Eric Rohmer journey, our Tales of the Four Seasons journey. So we have another film and then maybe another video to wrap things up. But I'm having fun so far. Are you? I hope so. If not, I apologize. I really don't want you to not enjoy yourselves. I mean, it's is that right? I want you to enjoy yourselves. I don't want you to feel like you're not having fun. So if you feel that way, I apologize deeply. But I hope that's not the case. I think above all, most importantly, I hope that you are happy and healthy and well, and that you continue to watch a lot of great movies, including Eric Rohmer films, including Tales of the Four Seasons, including other works in the Criterion Collection and beyond. So my dear friends, yes, if I see, I hope to see you at the next video, but in any event, my dear friends, please continue to be happy and healthy and well, and I'll see you at the next one. So until then, my dear friends, stay strong, stay safe, and cheers.